The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Hello everyone and welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. My name is Ray Arell. This is episode 21. The Agile Coaching Network is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. Agile Alliance is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence since the start of the Agile Manifesto way back in the dawn of 2001. They're the ones who put on the big Agile conference. It's coming up a couple of weeks over in San Diego. Hopefully we'll see you all over there. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question is, how can an IT coach influence and shift agility on the business side of an organization? Steve, did you want to go kick that off?
Okay. I would suggest that first you need to take stock of where you are. What current existing agile activities are underway in software and anywhere else in the organization, a kind of inventory of active agile assets, if you like. And secondly, to make an assessment of what support you either have or think you might have on the business side. And in the light of that, then you can start to plot your guerrilla warfare. If the context is very hostile, then it's going to be very subterranean. If, on the other hand, you have a collaborative relationship with the business side of the organization, then it may be possible in a very collaborative way to pursue it. And typically, we'll proceed with leadership storytelling as the main mode of winning converts and winning enthusiasm for this different way of doing things. But it's very contextual and very dependent on what is your current situation and what degree of support you currently have and what degree of resistance you currently have.
So I find the question a little bit interesting from the aspect of how an IT coach influences and how anybody influences an organization, and maybe part of this, and Lisa, if you're on the call, we can activate your microphone to give us more context to this, but I found that as I talk to certain organizations, the view of IT has always been sort of this, stepchild that's on the side that really doesn't contribute to the bottom line of the organization. And that's, as a view, maybe back in the 1980s might have been true, but today the experience of any company that you go to, either an online activity of going to an online store or any of the other places that you can go to basically interact with the business, even as an internal employee, it's a strategic component of delivering value for the whole organization. So my advice is that you actually go off and start participating because you are a part of the value stream of the company. And Lisa, I noticed you've raised your hand. Do you want to give us a little bit more on this?
Yes, thank you. Just to give you a little more background, and first of all, I've moved on from this role since I posted this question, but this was at an insurance company that it is in the midst of their transformation to Agile, and my role was under the what they were calling the PMO, but an Agile PMO in the IT side for one area of the business. So there were multiple layers of people between me and any of the business folks. And the word I was getting back was that the business side, although the company had said they were moving to Agile, the business side was not getting the training and didn't understand what that meant to make that shift. And I was told that I could not offer them regular coaching as I was doing for my IT teams.
And what was the reason for that?
Probably budget, just that I worked in one department and they were in another. And also I was already supporting 10 teams all of their various folks on those teams, as well as several directors. There's only so much of me to go around.
It's always the case, isn't it?
I'm just interested, why can't you just go over to these guys and start talking to them at the coffee machine?
Because they're not even in the same country in some cases,
Okay.
let alone in the same building. It's one of the very large and well-established insurance companies.
Now, what's interesting about what you're saying, though, is as far as the permission of going over and talking to another team. What I find is we coach organizations. There's a point where there has to be somebody that we've taught. Or let's say if I've worked with the director or maybe the executive management of my own team, or I've worked with others within the organization. How about getting one of those individuals to go off and give that kind of first level, this is what Agile is, sort of tooling up others within your organization to do that. Have you tried that?
Yes, and again, after I posted this, I was working with the product manager at the director level, who was also reaching out to all the business people, as well as some of my product owners who did schedule some little mini workshops for some of their business contacts. So we did get to do some of it, and it was well received, just explaining some of the core concepts and user stories, writing and points, and they did see the benefit as we were getting the IT side to shift in terms of what was being delivered, but we needed them to understand how to give the team what they needed so that they could be agile. So we were making small progress, but it looked to me when I wrote this that at the time there was kind of this wall that I couldn't penetrate to really reach out to all of the business side people that needed to collaborate with us. So I don't know if that's, more typical or not. Also, this isn't a high-tech company. They do still think of things the way you were describing earlier from the 90s, where the business is the business and then the IT kind of supports them.
I think there's still a lot of businesses that are suffering from this. I mean, I was just talking with a company near Portland not long ago, which was a financial institution, and they were dealing with the same thing. The IT organization was shifting to more of an agile methodology, and the stakeholders who typically were asking for things still wanted to do it the old way. They still wanted their, on-demand sort of taxi service of whoever yelled the loudest got the requirement versus, let's go ahead and look at and prioritize what the right value is for what we're delivering. And it's not about delivering everything. It's about delivering what's valuable to the organization. And shifting that conversation was really hard for them, as most are.
And I think those are going to be the types of businesses that are in the rear of that shift. the big old, financial, insurance, hospitals, those types of organizations.
Well, I think there are examples that are doing the shift and who are seriously addressing it from all these dimensions, not only in IT. But I think on a broader scale, probably you're right that they are still a bit the laggards.
So would you say that one influence point, since we were talking about how do we influence these organizations, that one would be to use examples, sort of point them towards either case studies or point them towards here's other organizations that are doing it well?
Certainly, that has to be part of it. And I would put the emphasis on building coalitions and then building coalitions of coalitions. And that if in any organization of significant size, it's going to take some time. And you're going to need a coalition to make it happen. And so you ask whether it's unusual to have a wall. It would be unusual to have only one wall. You're likely to have multiple walls and dragons and snakes and tigers and all sorts of other kind of prowling the corridors. You're changing an organization is not for the faint of heart, and you need to be ready for that. And you're going to need coalitions to get through this. And as I say, building excitement, building energy, finding people who are on the same page, people who are willing to commit, people who see the future at any level. And it's probably initially going to be very informal and our sort of lunch breaks, coffee sessions, something just after work in the bar, and over time build up enough coalitions of people that start to kind of move up the chain and start to get into reach people who have some influence on the business side. And particularly if you can find a sponsor, a senior sponsor on the business side, then you can start to really move it along, because then you can start to get sort of formal meetings and formal presentations. And if those presentations excite people, then the coalitions start to grow.
If I might add another word in there, so you're saying coalition of the willing.
The passionate. Willing is not good enough. You need passion.
And I think this passion, usually I always assume that people are at least passionate for the work that they are doing, at least to some extent. Otherwise, they would maybe not do it. So a way how to go about this thing is just call a person. I mean, if you are not in the same building, it's of course a bit of a tricky thing, but reach out to a person and maybe share something with that person. So really like reaching out, asking a question, for example. Hey, you're on the business side. Actually, I would like to understand the following, because I, on the IT side, have that and that kind of a problem. Do you have an idea what we could do? And this starts a conversation that helps you to understand, is there a passionate person on the other side that is willing to explore this further together with you?
Right. Ben, Floyd just mentioned that, also putting out articles from Ford and Harvard Business Review and others. And I noticed that one of the Agile coaches at this one company I was visiting last week, they had took that recent article that was about Agile that was published in, I believe, the Harvard Business Review, and had multiple copies. They must have bought probably 20 stacks of these things, because there wasn't a section where I sat down someplace that there wasn't a copy of that magazine. And I finally asked what coach did that, and the person raised their hand and said, well, I just wanted to make sure that I put these strategically where the executives sit, which was interesting. Brian Rain, you had your hand up. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, hi, Ray. I think it's interesting. One of the thoughts that occurred to me is if you're not collaborating with the business, even if there's like that just physical barrier and that's not being overcome, is like, are you really, how much of an agile transformation are you actually in? I mean, you can certainly get the teams working in the frameworks, but half of the principles require the business people to be at least engaged in some level.
I completely agree with you. It was out of my control, but I completely agree with you.
Now, you didn't leave this job because of that lack of influence?
No, I was there on a contract, and they ended up having a reorg, and that changed everything. So they were very sorry to see me go. They knew that they needed somebody in my role to stay. I hope that they're moving forward.
That's all we can ever say about our exes, right?
And I thank you for taking my question. There's some great feedback here. Thank you, everyone.
No problem. Any other thing to add to this on influence points, back to other outside organizations?
One of the things, and this is maybe hopefully not too much of an aside, but I myself, and I'm sure like probably everyone on the call, gets their LinkedIn inboxes flooded with different recruiting opportunities, I guess. And so I'll occasionally I'm happy in my current role, but I'll occasionally just kind of look at a few of them, and just the misunderstanding of either what a recruiter thinks an agile coach is, or what a company is looking for in an agile coach is pretty significant. I'll occasionally interact with the recruiter and go, you're not actually looking for this, are you? Because you need to think about maybe a few other things, which I'm sure they probably just delete the email. But I think that's an important part of what we can do too, is just make sure we're educating them, everybody around us on what agile coaches do before you even get into those situations.
Well, we're entering an interesting time, because I know that if you look at some of the major consultancies, the traditional consultancies that have been helping most of these organizations for decades, things like the Bains and McKinseys, are starting to staff agile coaches within their ranks and providing agile coaching services. And maybe this is sort of a stand of when you were a consultant and then moving towards coach. There's a big difference between the stance of someone's asking me to consult for them or to coach for them. They're two different things. And maybe that's part of the challenge here is that some of these hiring managers still think of this as a perspective of you're going to come in and consult for me versus somebody who is going to help the team to realize how to go use these values themselves. So with that, do we want to go ahead and pivot to the next question? If there's no objection, let's move forward. There's actually a sidebar question. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. Sandeep put this in. He was on the call a little bit early, and he just said, hey, I need to have us talk about this. And it was, how does an Agile coach get to feel that he or she is moving in the right direction? How do they know that they're moving in the correct path? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Basically, it's a question of what are signs of success of agile coaching. That's a very general question. I think depends on what you're doing, but of course you can see. I would always look at okay, not only do people start applying the practices, but do we get the agile mindset going? So what kind of things are happening in the organization? And if you see that people start to embrace change, that they start to have a stronger customer focus, if you see that in the conversations, then I think you get, that's for me, it would at least be feedback that we are moving into the right direction. When people start repeating what you said and they think it was their idea, that's also a good indicator, for example.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, and I think that when we see others teaching the methods that we've taught them, I think that exemplifies the fact we're moving in that direction. Adam, did you have something to add to this?
Yeah, hi. I think there's the best measure really is if people from the team keep coming to your retrospectives, to your ceremonies, and still talk with you. Because I did have the one case of a team where people would not show up at the retrospective because they were unhappy with the changes. So people will vote with their feet.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's so how did that make you feel when people didn't show?
Well, first of all, it did feel like a failure and did feel pretty bad. I did go and talk with the people individually and as a team. And I went to the sponsor and to that team's manager, and I said, they're not open to changing the way they're working, and let me focus on those teams that I want to change. And, I think after a while they did. They did turn around a bit, but they had to take their time.
Right. So the diminishing return, or just being comfortable enough to say that this team's not ready for what I'm providing them right now, and that's okay. Is that true?
Yeah, there's always someone else who needs your help.
That's true. Joe, do you have something?
Hey, I do wanted to add that one of the things that I look for within myself and others around me is the creative aspects of learning, development, new ideas, and my personal own understanding of Agile as I experience, as those experiences turn into beliefs and my mindset shifts. Right. So that's one measure that am I authentic in whatever I'm executing? And then from the people around me, what I see is the creative ideas emerge. They're willing to step out of their comfort zone, willing to experiment, be more courageous, not just doing the practices, but doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Those are really good points.
I mean, one
Steve.
aspect of this, Steve Denning, is that the idea of Agile is to add value to external customers and end users, and that everybody in the organization should have a clear line of sight as to how what they are doing is adding value to some external customer or end user. A coach is several steps away from the end user and ultimate customer. But the same really applies, and we see in some firms like Vistaprint, about which I've written, that in fact they are setting the coaching relationship and what used to be called HR with that external focus of the work in hand, so that the role of the coach is to enhance the experience of the external customer, not to make the coachee happy or to make the boss happy or some internal customer happy, but how to have this total focus on enhancing value for the end user and external customer.
And what if you have difficulty identifying how that connects? What would you recommend a coach would do to, since you're a couple levels removed, how would you kind of reinforce that I am adding that value to that value?
Try harder.
Try harder.
Okay. Well, what I think is a coach should be also relatively close to a product owner. So,
Okay.
And a product owner for me is at least a proxy to the customer. If coaches also work with product owners, they should at least see that dimension.
Right. And I would also say they need to be connected with management, because if you look at, from a coaching perspective, we are enabling people to achieve a better work velocity. They're able to deliver more value, that my input to the team can be seen on the team, meaning that if people are getting great reviews because they're better at delivering that value on a more consistent basis, and that directly goes to some of the influence that we did as a coach, then that's a good way of actually looking at that measurement. Scott, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to suggest, if you're an Agile coach and you're trying to find that connection, value stream analysis is an important tool. I've walked into an organization and I say, well, how do we make money? How do we get successful? And they say, you don't know that? And I say, no, I don't. And then we have a discussion, and then we plan a value stream analysis activity.
Sure. So I find that most organizations have no clue what that looks like in the very beginning. They deliver a lot of stuff, but if they had to say, what does it take to get from beginning to end, that's a tough thing for people. So where do people learn more about value stream map and looking at these?
Ooh, I've just had the experience of working with other folks. There's a little bit about it in the book Lean Startup, I guess.
Right.
It's not really rocket science. You just kind of get the people together. In the beginning, here's our customer, and how do we receive stimulus from them? And then we map out all the steps that we do. So it begins and ends with the customer. And then we basically build a simple process map of all the things in between and who contributes and what do they do.
Sure.
A book on value stream mapping that I've used as well as for sharing as to my own reference is just simply called Value Stream Mapping. Comes from Karen Martin and Mike Osterling.
Yeah, that's a good book. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you find too is that if you do the full formal value stream mapping, then you get to see where the biggest waste is in the system, which is waiting for stuff. And that's typically where a majority of the time is eaten up, is just I'm waiting for something to come to me. So do we want to pivot to the next question? I think we should pivot.
As a coach, what is your process in brackets to discover how you will help them when you first engage with the client? So it's really about the very first engagement. What do we do?
You engage with the client, and then how to do that engagement. How can I help them, and how can I discover how I can help a client?
Yeah.
As a coach.
Yeah. One thing I definitely advise is try to listen as much as possible.
Yes.
Because and then try to hear the pain points. That's where you should start.
Yeah, I think it's very much about listening and encouraging a client to tell stories. What's bugging this person, and what are the things that are in the way for this person? And then, by carefully listening, you are getting a good idea of what could you maybe offer, what kind of impulses or ideas could you give that person.
And I think, Henrik, that was a good point. You said person. I think it's really, really helpful to be effective if you talk to a person, not to a CEO of whatever or IT director of whatever. because otherwise you will get probably answers that are common sense in the organization, but not the real problem.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe one of the challenges as a coach. As a coach, you need to really deeply believe that all people are equal, and the status of a CEO or a senior executive shouldn't make you respect that person more than anybody else, I think.
Or less, depending.
Or less. I mean, that would be also stupid. I mean, it's just a person, a human being sitting in front of you, or you're talking to. Yeah, and then it's about listening without prejudices and whatever.
So I think it's also, though, I think it's also where like your facilitating skills come into play the most, right? Like you're definitely listening, but like I'll do some human-centered design recipes, getting them to actually sometimes even draw out what they think their problems are. I mean, the most common one is just doing like just post-it notes and write your problems down and get them to rank their problems or their desired outcomes, depending on how they feel, and then have them go through the ranking exercises and try to do it with a larger group. I'm assuming by the question that you're engaging, you're starting and you're not doing like the very first initial conversation. So, getting the group together from, managers all the way down to developers, and then having everybody list their problems out and just having that transparency of throwing everything on the table and ranking it and seeing where you go from there.
Yeah. Recently I've read, I can't remember, somewhere I read it, somebody had a technique where he said that one way you can also do it to let this person tell a story about others. So starting maybe to rave about the bad collaboration with the neighboring department and so on, because when people are telling stories like this, that was what this person was saying, they reveal a lot of their own thinking. So even that is sometimes very helpful. And I'm still thinking about it. Somehow, I think usually I don't like when people are talking about others. On the other hand, it's true that this is very revealing.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah. Any other ideas about this? How to engage first with the client? How to discover how you will help them?
One thing that might be helpful is if you share your outside perception of what they are doing in terms of business, what you know about them, what maybe your friends and family think about them. That's sometimes a door opener, being it positive or negative, but it's all about the customer. And so probably with a little bit of luck, you are then sharing real customer information, or at least close to it.
We talked about pain points, but that might also be good to get to dreams and hopes and
yes.
Where is the role that you could have which you'd be thrilled to be able to look back on and say, wow, that was something quite amazing. If you can get into that kind of a conversation, then it may be helpful to counter the discussion about the pain point.
No, I 100% agree. If you can get them to that kind of aspirational conversation, that's very telling, because that means that you're not dealing with a very dysfunctional organization that everybody's just dreading to be there. There's still like that positive kind of outcome. Everybody, hopefully everybody's more bought in and engaged from the get-go, from the start.
I mean, one low-profile way of getting at it is to say, well, tell me about the best experience you've ever had. And then say, is that your current experience? No, it's not. Okay, how could we make your current experience more like that? That, in a sense, without threatening or challenging them to reveal their ultimate hopes and dreams, but simply talk about the facts as they have experienced life so far.
A good point in that direction, and you can use it at every stage, I would say, is ask people what they are proud of and what they want to keep in the way they are working. And very, very often you can easily reconcile it with an agile principle, because normally human beings are all striving for the same thing and experience the same thing as success. So most of the time this gets you talking about that they're actually already doing something that you wanted to teach them, but you don't need to do this anymore. So it's as well a starting point.
So the next question is, what techniques do you recommend to facilitate agile principles and values becoming a continuous part of teams' thoughts and practices. And that's John Bobbitt. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
That's also a good one, I think.
I mean, my take is that keeping it very simple is a key here. I wrote my book in 2010. It had 7 principles, and I found that people can't remember 7 things. So then I reduced it to 5, and they still couldn't remember 5 things. And so now I'm talking about 3 things. And if emphasizing just 3 things is something that people can easily remember, and that then enables you to keep that through many conversations without stretching people's memory. But keep it simple would be one of my strong recommendations.
And I would pick up on that and say, keep it. Do it again and again and again, and especially recognize people who are doing it. I've noticed that people who do the right things are very often unconsciously doing them in the beginning, and they do them in small steps. And if you notice these small steps and in front of everybody say, this is exactly the thing we need to do more. This was great. Then these people normally flush and say, I didn't do anything. You tell them what they did, and suddenly they start to promote this practice much more actively.
Yeah.
So I've one of the things I did with a couple of more of my mature Scrum teams was I actually mid-sprint for each team, I'll actually pull the groups together and talk about one of the 12 Agile principles and have them start with give them, take a few minutes in the beginning to do a little bit of an in-depth talk about what the principle is, and then have the group talk about where they feel that the current state of the organization is as it relates to this principle, and then what the aspirational state would be for this principle, and then guide them through a discussion of what it would take to get from point A to point B. And I think we're about halfway through the 12 at this point, and it seems to be a really good conversation. We've gotten really good feedback on it.
We did a similar thing in one of my retrospectives where we would grade where we're at with the various principles and where we want to be. And those that had the highest delta was where we focused the discussion.
Did you do that? Like, how did you do that? Did you do it like 1 or 2 principles of retro, or did you try to go all 12 in a single retro?
Before the retro, I gave a survey to everyone, so they'd vote on how well are we putting these each of the principles in practice, and also how much do you think this principle is important, or where do you want to be with this principle? Because I found that some teams shy away from some of the principles. And then I found those where we had the largest delta, and we talked about why the delta is there and what we can do to improve on that.
Yeah, we do something similar, but rather on a cross-organizational level. So I'm running trainings where we have participants from all across the company, usually 25 in the same room. And as a homework, we give them the principles and ask them on a self-assessment, what do you think? How far are you? Are you good in implementing this? Are you living this principle, or are you not so good in living this? And we get that self-assessment back, and then we mix the team, the people in the training into groups where we have always one person that, or a couple of persons who are strong in this, in making this principle come alive, and some people who are not so strong. So then by the discussion, they can learn from each other. So that has always led to really good conversations, and it helps us spreading good approaches and good thinking.
One more thing that we did was I simply put up the 12 principles on different, let's call them posters, around the space where we usually had all our ceremonies, and we tried to point out the principle that we were applying when making a decision, moving forward with some action. So that kept the principles in our mind whenever we did that.
Yeah, 100% agree. I've started doing that about a year ago as well, and that's been really useful. Just in the kind of impromptu interactions that you have in the discussions with your team, having those 12 up there.
And when other people from the team start pointing at the principles, that also replies to one of the previous questions. How do you know if you're reaching them?
Good. So do we move on to the next one, or is there something more to say about this? Or questions are always bad, right? Should we move on to the next one? Yes.
So if we're going to pivot, I've got the question. What are some ways to coach a team to plan, commit to work in a sprint that is realistic so sprints are not constantly failing or failed? I keep saying failed.
So we have a situation where a number of sprints are, or where sprints are constantly failing, and what intervention is needed towards the team. Interesting one. Probably they are overcommitted. So I think I would look at the sprint planning actually in this case to see what's going on there.
I would ask them, did you do a retrospective last sprint? That's probably the very first question I would ask.
Absolutely.
And then, yes, please continue. I would as well look at their planning. How do they arrive at the decision to start a sprint? How would you do it, Henrik?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I've not been in that position actually, but I mean, I think I like what you said about the retrospective, and it's a bit hen and the egg. Do you first look at the retrospective or at the sprint planning? You need to look at both. And for me, as a coach, I would just observe it first to see what's going on and then give them feedback. But I would not wait for too long with that feedback. I would maybe call them in very, very early to say, okay, are you sure about what's going on now?
We actually found ourselves in that position where our sprints were failing, and that was also creating a lot of unhealthy behavior. For one sprint, the team actually broke the infrastructure because everybody was trying to push their changes just before the sprint review. So the way we did address this is that we now strongly underplan. So we do plan less than the estimated bandwidth of the team, and if people finish work before the sprint, they'll pull in some small items that should be done or that the team never has thermally time for, and this has created a much more healthy situation where the teams are able to deliver on what they planned in the sprint, and something extra on the side as well.
What I've done as a product owner in such a situation is I try to reinforce priorities mid-sprint. If I see that obviously progress is slow and that maybe the team is not mature and stuff, then I will tell them what really, really matters as priority and tell them that I will be really disappointed if nothing of this priority gets done. Because in a way, I'm offering them to do something less, but I don't give them the choice to do what they want, and still keep them focused so that later in the retrospective, we can talk about why did we have that overcommitment? The priorities didn't change, and that's important. I don't change my priorities at that point in time. I just emphasize, because otherwise I'm the culprit who is changing, and that won't work.
I agree with that approach, and something I use or we use in our teams is we do ask the teams to identify the items that are at risk of not being delivered about a week before the end of the sprint. We do 3-week sprints, and if there is something that's at risk but should be prioritized before something that seems to be on track, we have a discussion with the team if they can rearrange the work to put more priority on the at-risk item. But it's a conversation, not a you have to drop everything and do this.
You may want to look and see, is it one team that's having this problem, or is it more than one team? I've seen some organizations where the problem is not in the team itself and its capabilities, but the organization is either implicitly or explicitly pushing more work onto the team than they can actually accomplish. And so they end up having a kind of a snowplow with just an increasing load of requirements which are being pushed further down the track. If that's the case, you need to solve the organizational problem, not necessarily the team's problem.
I think it's also good to look at what are they calling a failure. I mean, if it's just not delivering on what they committed to, but there was a lot of learning and a lot of uncertainty that was discovered along that path, then that's not necessarily a failed sprint. That's just we just learned, more than we thought we were going to in this time, and that's something that should be celebrated, not considered a failure. And that can be pretty obvious sometimes, and I know it's not the most likely thing that usually happens, but it's a good thing to call out as well when you see it.
I mean, I agree if it's one sprint, but if every sprint is a learning experience, then you have a different kind of thing in your hands. And you need to say, why are we always learning? Why aren't we actually should normally be getting the fully done in every sprint? Most teams should be getting most of the time, and that's not the case. Either the team isn't getting done most of the time, or a number of teams aren't getting done, and you need to look at why that's happening.
Maybe someone else has to have the learnings, not the team.
Right.
Yeah, I think one thing that Steve was hinting at is, for me, sometimes also the question is who's making the commitment to the customer. Is it a product owner, and is there an overcommitment coming from that angle? So somebody is pushing a lot of stuff towards the teams. I mean, that's also one of those tricky things, how to have a proper balance between a product owner being very demanding and a team being able to protect themselves from overcommitting.
Yeah, but this you would see that the team is actually completing always a part. That would be a very strong indication that they always struggle to complete everything. But if they manage to complete something to a reliable quality, then it's probably somebody pushing or somebody saying yes too easily, whichever way. But if they don't consistently deliver, it's some other root cause, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, more thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I think one important thing is that you talk about what you consider failing, and whoever said that will probably have a definition. And again, my experience is that sometimes you just need to tell the team what you consider a success when they really overestimated their capabilities and actually are quite happy that something has happened and that you can go to the customer and show him something. This will probably make them more realistic. So sometimes it goes that way. I remember one failed sprint where in the end the architect told me, I'm so happy that we failed in this 2 weeks. Normally we take 6 months to do it in this organization. It always depends on what is the value stream that you're looking at in the end and the long run. So.
Okay, I don't know, Ray, are you back?
I think I'm back. Do you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I just saw you popping up now in the wheel, so I thought I asked you whether you're back.
Did we pass your test, Ray?
I don't know if you guys passed my test, but my internet actually decided to crash. So I'm logged into my phone, which actually seems to be working, which is good. It looks like you guys had a really lively conversation, so that's good. So we're almost at the top of the hour. I'll just go ahead and give us some announcements. We are going to be, a number of us will be at the Agile Alliance's Agile 2018 over in San Diego. From what I understand, it's a sold out crowd almost. There's going to be almost pretty close to 2,500 of your closest Agile buddies and friends that'll be there. Hopefully we'll see you. I'll be spending most of my time at the Agile Alliance Business Agility Lab. You guys are welcome to join me over there. We're going to have some activities going, as well as getting some ACN events going. So with that, thank you guys for the great conversation. Thank you guys for filling in and having a great set of conversations. I look forward to listening to the recording.
Yeah, luckily you have recorded it.
Yes. So with that, I think we're done for today.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Take care. It's been awesome, guys.
Bye.
This podcast is provided by the Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.